So in my recent hair growth update video, which will be linked above, I had mentioned that I am currently going through postpartum shedding following my recent pregnancy. So considering that this video was taken on March 5th, 2025, and I had reached the 1-year mark of my hair growth update 25 days later, this shows how rapidly you start to lose your hair during the onset of postpartum shedding. However, in addition to experiencing postpartum shedding, I have realized that not only am I losing my hair, but my scalp has once again become extremely dry. Now, since my video where I spoke about finally getting rid of my dry flaky scalp, I rarely would have any issues where my scalp is concerned. However, as I was approaching the end of my pregnancy, I started to realize that my scalp once again was becoming uncontrollably dry, even after properly hydrating and moisturizing my scalp. Now, I know people often say that a healthy scalp is the foundation for healthy hair growth, but I wanted to highlight that although that is true, you can still have healthy hair growth with a problematic scalp. Now, I know that is a bold statement, but let me explain. Okay, so we have to remember that unlike the skin covering our bodies, which has 3 layers, there are 5 layers of skin for the scalp. So although what we see is the first layer of scalp, this is not the entire scalp. Now, most times the first layer of the scalp reflects what is happening beneath the surface, and we should definitely pay attention to what is happening on the external layer of the scalp to understand what is going on beneath the surface and endeavor to rectify any problems. Now, as it relates to a problematic scalp, such as having an extremely dry, flaky scalp, this sometimes does not pose a problem to the hair growth cycle or your hair growth progress, although it can lead to other scalp issues like itching or inflammation. However, the hair growth cycle is primarily regulated by internal biological and hormonal factors such as genetics, hormonal levels which fluctuate heavily during pregnancy and postpartum, nutrition, blood circulation, and overall health and stress levels. So having a dry, flaky scalp wouldn't affect hair growth, as the follicle underneath the scalp where the hair is actually produced may still be functioning well, especially if your internal environment is supporting it. However, if you're maintaining a healthy diet and you are still having this issue, then there is another underlying issue to tackle to eliminate this scalp issue, which is your external hair care routine. So we have to start looking at the products we are using. Now, bear in mind that although a flaky scalp is typically a symptom of imbalance, whether externally or internally, it is often due to either dryness, product buildup, yeast like malassezia, or irritation. However, you can have a dry, flaky, irritated, or inflamed scalp without the hair follicle itself being affected. Well, at least not immediately, which is why you may not experience any issues with hair growth despite this scalp condition, as your body might still be prioritizing hair growth due to other factors. Again, this does not mean you shouldn't try to rectify the cause of your scalp condition, as over time, chronic scalp issues can lead to miniaturization of the follicle, weaker hair strands, or stunted growth, but it's not always an immediate effect. So with that, the generalized narrative that a healthy scalp equals healthy hair growth is an advice that is given more as a preventative and protective step in your hair journey rather than an absolute requirement, as once again, the hair follicles aren't directly being affected, especially in the case of having a dry, flaky scalp, which is also why knowing whether you are actually dealing with a dry, flaky scalp as opposed to other potential scalp conditions is very important, because there are some other scalp conditions that gives you a dry, flaky scalp. However, a healthy scalp, especially the internal layers of the scalp, creates the ideal environment for continued hair growth and long-term follicle vitality. It also helps prevent premature shedding, breakage at the root, or scalp conditions that could eventually affect density and length retention. So although having an extremely dry, flaky scalp is considered a scalp condition and it requires immediate attention to prevent any other issues leading to hair loss, this can easily be fixed, as this condition is due to a lack of hydration both externally and internally, rather than having a condition that is triggered by yeast or any infections. So with all that said, you're still able to grow your hair at a healthy or even accelerated rate despite having a dry, flaky scalp, because hair growth is mostly regulated internally and your follicles are still functioning well. Also, the flakiness hasn't yet interfered with your follicles' ability to grow hair. Again, this is why it is important that you rectify any issues before it's too late, not just for growth, but for comfort, overall skin health, and long-term follicle support. Now, I had mentioned that at the tail end of my pregnancy and postpartum that my scalp had started to become extremely dry again, and a quick little research indicates that the shift in my hormones can sometimes throw off my scalp's oil balance, which leads to dryness and flaking. So if you've just had a baby or is experiencing dry scalp during your pregnancy, this could be why. And with that said, since doing my big chop, this is how much hair I was able to grow and retain in the past 12 months. Now, if you found today's video very helpful, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And until the next time, I will be right back here with another video.